So as we've been doing with each of the class periods, let's do a quick review of the chapter content. And keep your books closed. Don't open to the introduction, you cheaters. All right, what's chapter 1 all about? The beginning of Galilean ministry. Chapter 2. Controversies with the Jews. Chapter 3. Appoints the 12 apostles. And what other significant moment happens there? The accusation that Jesus is casting out demons by Beelzebub. I should speak a little different. It's not so much that that's a significant moment. It's just that that's a teaching that pretty much everybody has heard of. It's a teaching that even people who are not religious people know about, the unforgivable sin, etc. So that's in Mark chapter 3. All right, Mark chapter 4. All right, his teaching in parables, Mark 5. Miracles, all right. Do you remember which specific miracles are outlined in Mark 5? The man with the legion of demons, all right, the Gerasene demoniac, all right, and then Jairus' daughter, and then the woman with the issue of blood. Okay, all right, great. You guys are doing really well with that. What is the chapter content for today? Death of John the Baptist and the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, okay? All right, excellent. You guys are doing good with those, and we'll just keep reviewing those things. Do you find that to be helpful as you're thinking about, where is that story found? I think it's in Mark somewhere. Well, now you can pinpoint, and you can remember where these things are. All right, Mark chapter 6. So Jesus returns to his hometown. Now, I think we all know this. His hometown was what city? Nazareth, okay. But what city has he been using as another sort of hometown as he's been in Galilee preaching? Capernaum, all right? He's been in Capernaum quite a bit. So sometimes when it says he came to his home, it's talking about Capernaum. But when it says here in Mark 6, he came to his hometown, we know, of course, that that's Nazareth. All right, so he comes home to Nazareth, and as Jesus often did, he goes in the synagogue, and he has an opportunity to teach there while he is there. And when you read verse 2 of chapter 6, it says, when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and the many listeners were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what is the wisdom given to him and such miracles as these performed by his hands? If you just stop reading at verse 2, it almost seems like Jesus is getting a favorable response from the people in Nazareth. They're very impressed with what he's teaching, and they're saying, wow, where did this teaching come from? Where did he get the ability to do these things? It seems like they're impressed, and they're very amazed at what he's doing. But that's not really what's going on, because we keep reading, and we see that while they are astonished, it's not because they're impressed in a good way. They're astonished because they know who Jesus is. They watched him grow up, and they start to say, who does this guy think he is? That's really the astonishment that they're expressing. Verse 3, is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Who does this guy think he is? And so you can imagine there are people there in the synagogue who are listening to Jesus teaching. And they're saying, I remember this little boy playing football with my kids when he was just a wee little lad. I can remember him playing stickball and getting into trouble when he was a mischievous little kid. And now he comes along and he's teaching and he's making all these grand acclamations about this is who I am, and he's doing, who does this guy think he is? And so they're not actually receiving Jesus favorably. They are familiar with him. They watched him grow up. They know who his family is. And now he's coming along as this teacher. And he's getting a lot of respect from people. He's getting a lot of attention from people. And they're having a hard time believing that Jesus is who he said he is. Well, what was Jesus' response to their estimation of him at this moment? Verse 6 tells us. He was, I'm sorry, is it not verse 6?
He was surprised.
Yeah, verse 6. He wondered, he was amazed at their unbelief. They're amazed that Jesus is making all of these statements about himself. Who does this guy think he is? And Jesus is amazed at them, that they don't believe any of the things that he's saying.
He's backing up everything with miracles.
He's backing up everything that he's saying with miracles. He's proving, he's providing evidence and testimony to the fact that he is the Son of God and that he speaks authoritatively. We've already seen some of that in Mark chapter 1. It's not like Jesus is making some grand claims but not doing anything to provide proof. Now, I do know in Mark 6 that it says in verse 5, he could do no miracle there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and he healed them. He didn't perform a whole lot of miracles in Nazareth, but he provided enough to serve as proof. Now, the reason I think he didn't perform a whole lot of miracles in Nazareth is because of the unbelief of the people. We don't believe who this Jesus fellow says he is, so we're not going to bring our sick people to him. We're not going to bring our people who need healing out to him. We don't believe him. And so Jesus doesn't have as many opportunities to heal and to perform other miracles here. But Jesus is amazed at their unbelief. If you're reading from the New King James, it says Jesus marveled at their unbelief. And I point that out. I shouldn't tell you this because I have a sermon about this, and I'm giving it away. I can't use my sermon now. But there's 2 times in the Scriptures where it said Jesus marveled. This is one of them. He marveled at their unbelief. The other time is in Luke 7. You remember the story about the centurion who had that great faith? You know, you don't even have to come into my house. Just say the word, my servant will be healed. Jesus marveled at his faith. So one instance it was positive. The other instance it was negative, as in here in Mark 6. Look at question number 1 in your material. Their familiarity with Jesus caused them to miss an opportunity to be blessed by him. What about us? Can you think of any ways we miss out on being blessed by Jesus for the same reason? The reason that we're familiar with him or familiar with things that go along with being a Christian. Can you think of some instances where we miss out for the same reason that these Nazarene people did?
Well, they're stubborn.
Just tell it like it is, Patty.
I am. You know me. No, I think that they were stubborn. They're looking at this guy that they knew, like you said, playing in the streets and getting into mischief. I'm sure he did. And they're like, who the heck is this guy? You know, how
right.
can he come in here and know all this?
Right.
You know, I mean, people, and it happens in our world. Somebody will tell you something that's the truth, and you got to go find proof before you believe that.
Okay.
No,
all right. Good. All right. Mel?
I had a little ta-ta with Navy chaplain one time, and I used verse 3. That chaplain insisted that Mary was a virgin, and she definitely, these were not Jesus' brothers, except in the sense that they were like, you're my brother. Yeah. But he hadn't, the church, as we know today, hadn't been established yet. And they said, you know, she was.
Yeah, perpetual, yeah, right. No, I think this is very much Jesus' flesh and blood family. Yeah. Okay. Todd?
The first thing that I thought of was, in many instances, people who are raised in the church. You have had the truth your whole life. And you can't see it, you choose not to see it, and you wander away from the truth.
Okay.
At some point in your life.
Great. Good application. So you have that familiarity because you grew up with it and you know what it's all about, and then you end up turning away from it later and rejecting it. Okay, Mitch? Good to see all these hands. This is great. Thank you.
We spend a lot of time seeking knowledge and understanding instead of just believing and enjoying.
Okay. You care to elaborate a little bit more?
Well, you know, we put a lot of, I mean, I'm not trying to de-emphasize Bible study and knowledge in any way, shape, or form. I do believe in that, and I believe that's important. But I believe there's also a time just to sit back and meditate and listen to Jesus and commune with him and realize he's our friend, he's our champion. And we're never going to be enough. None of us, doesn't matter what we do, are enough.
Okay. All right. It's not about just learning the facts. It's what the facts produce. It's about transformation. Did the people in Nazareth know the facts about who Jesus was? Yes, but did they know Jesus? No. Okay. So, yeah, to your point. All right. What about, and this is real simple application, but what about worship assemblies? I had a conversation with a young man once who, he and I were talking about the importance of coming together for worship and being present whenever God's people assemble. And he was fighting back against me a little bit against that. And, you know, I just want to be there on Sunday morning. I don't know that I need to do anything beyond that. I don't think there's any scripture that tells me I need to do anything beyond that. And I said, okay, I'm not going to argue against that point, but think about it this way. Why is it that you might be antagonistic about coming back on a Sunday night or a Wednesday night? And he said, well, we just do the same thing all the time. The worship periods, Sunday night's just like Sunday morning. It's no different. And I mean, why do I have to do the same thing 3 times a week? It's no different any time. What's he saying? It's familiar. And why do I need a triple dose when I can just get a single dose? Familiarity for him was breeding some contempt. And there's a million ways to respond to that, I think. But what I was trying to convey to him is that, you know, the things that we do, although they are familiar, we should never let them just become routine and mechanical. We need to put the right kind of investment mentally, emotionally into that, and we can get more out of that. We don't just do the same routine and let it become less important to us, because we miss out on great blessing if that's the way we approach it. If we instead see worship periods, Bible class periods as an opportunity to get the facts, as Mitch was saying, get the knowledge, and let that knowledge lead to transformation, then we will see the value of it. We'll see the importance of it. Ronnie?
What we're truly interested in, what is vital to us, we won't have that kind of attitude. If we're a great football fan, we follow with great zeal. If we love to go fishing and hunting, we do that with great zeal. Or on the illustrations go. What we're interested in, what's important to us, we're willing to put the time in and do put the time in because it's important to us. When a person fails to, when a person offers the kind of excuse like you just said, that clearly shows he's not really that interested in it.
All right. So, okay, Willeen. All right, y'all need to be quiet now. We got to move on. All right, no, go ahead.
Okay, talking about, coming 3 times a week, same thing. Okay, but you know what? We eat meals 3 times a day, and sometimes it may be the same thing. But you know what? We go to that table every time because it feeds our body.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And this feeds our soul whenever we are coming.
All right, good. Okay, now let's move on. Next section, verses 7 to 13. Jesus sends out the 12 on a preaching tour. And he gives them authority to cast out demons, and he instructs them to preach a message. Verse 12 says they were going out preaching that men should repent. And this tour that he sent them out on, this was not intended to be this long extended, 3-month, 4-month preaching tour. And we know that because of the instructions Jesus gives them. Jesus doesn't say, all right, pack, 2 big suitcases full of stuff. You're going to the airline, so make sure you get your 2 check bags. Don't just take a carry-on, okay? I mean, he doesn't tell them that. He says, just take minimal provision for yourself. And I think that indicates that this is just intended to be a short tour that he sends them out on. And he sends them out in pairs, 6 pairs. He sends them out 2 by 2. And there's been some speculation about why he sent them out in pairs. And I guess safety would be one thing. Safety, accountability, you'd have somebody to look after you and you can look after them, and that makes sense. But Jesus sends them out in these 6 pairs. And I suspect he did that because if he just sent 12 guys in one mass group, he wouldn't reach as many people. You can split them up into 6 pairs, you can spread them out across the 4 winds, and you can reach more people in doing that. So he sends them out in that way, I think, to facilitate his mission. and then also to provide for their own safety. I like what he says to them in verse 11. If any place does not receive you or listen to you, as you go out from there, shake the dust off the soles of your feet for a testimony against them. There's been a lot of discussion, of course, in the news over the past few years, really. But here lately with the Islamic terror attacks in Great Britain, note the contrast here between a religion of peace like Christianity and a religion where at least there are some who will take it to extremes and harm people via terrorism, like in Islam. Jesus says here, if people don't listen to you, move on. Move on to the next town. Be peaceful. Go your way. Shake the dust off your feet and move on. It's not necessarily what some in Islam or perhaps other religions might do. Now, I don't really have a point there to make other than this just been in the news lately, and it's been something that we've been thinking about because we've been seeing the stories. But Jesus says, if they don't accept you, just move on. Now, we need to apply that same kind of thing. We go out, we try to scatter the seed, we try to share the message of the gospel. If people don't listen to us, move on. All right, we talked about the parable of the sower, scattering the seed. We just got to plant and see what happens. Sometimes we come across soil that doesn't want to hear it, and we just move on. All right, now let's move on to the death of John the Baptist. This is a section that I think we could talk a lot about, and I'm interested to get your comments on that. Here's a word that you might want to write down or look up. Got your pen ready? All right, here's the word. Intercalation. Intercalation. I-N-T-E-R. I-N-T-E-R. Calation. C-A-L-A-T-I-O-N. Intercalation. Calation, calendar. Interject. The idea of intercalation is you take a story and you interject it into a chronological time period that it doesn't exactly fit in. All right? We saw the same thing last week in Mark 5. You remember the story. Jairus comes to Jesus. Come, help, my daughter's sick. Jesus starts to go to Jairus' house, and then what happens? He's interrupted by that woman who's got the issue of blood, and so Mark stops the story with Jairus. He shifts his attention to the woman, and then when that's over, he goes back to the story of Jairus. That's an intercalation. Interjecting an episode into the story of another. We see the same thing here. Mark is going along, he's talking about Jesus and sending out the disciples, and then he throws in the story of the death of John the Baptist. All right? So an intercalation. You learned something today. So, hope that's not the only thing you learned today, but we have an intercalation here where Mark interjects the story of what happened to John the Baptist. At this point in Jesus' life, John's dead. He's already dead. This is not something that's still going to happen in the future. John has just recently been killed in the recent past. But Mark says, all right, let me tell you how it happened. And Mark gives us a very full description of what happened to John the Baptist. Herod Antipas is learning about Jesus. He knows, he's heard about things Jesus has done. He's heard about the popularity that Jesus has, not in Nazareth, but in other places. And he's afraid. He's afraid of what this may turn into. And so he says in Mark chapter 6 and verse 16, John the Baptist, whom I beheaded. All right, see, it's past tense. John is already dead. John, whom I beheaded, has risen from the dead. And now verse 17 beginning, Mark is going to tell us about how John was killed. Herod had John arrested. Why did he have John arrested in months previous to his death?